Thanks very much. I just want to start off with the fact that I'm extremely pleased that we're extremely well aligned in the context of biodiversity offsets here. So I hope this isn't extremely repetitive. So what I'm going to do is go through a bit about when biodiversity offsets are the appropriate policy instrument, as there are a suite of instruments that are available, about some of the key design features to be considered in their implementation, some of the potential pitfalls to avoid as well, and also some lessons and key messages. And the insights here draw from a publication we released last year, where we looked across about 40 biodiversity offset programs that are in place, including 3 in-depth case studies of offsets in the US, in Mexico, and in Germany, with the objective being of deriving good practice insights for biodiversity offsets in general. So just a broader picture, here's a sort of a table of the types of policy instruments that are available for biodiversity conservation and sustainable use, from command and control to economic instruments to information and voluntary approaches. And here you see in green biodiversity offsets, just to put them in the bigger picture, to highlight that, again, they are based on the polluter pays approach. So it is a way to provide the correct incentives to producers and then eventually consumers as well. And hence, they are also a way to raise revenue also. And just to put this in context, here are some figures in terms of revenue that has been mobilized through, for example, environmentally related taxes, also a subset of that in terms of biodiversity related taxes, payments for ecosystem services, biodiversity offsets here, approximately 4.8 billion in 2016, and compared to ODA for bilateral biodiversity aid. Also, just to highlight that they're very versatile instruments. They've been applied in various different sectors, mining, wind power, pulp and paper, agriculture, forestry, etc. So they can be applied to a number of different sectors, and they've been applied in terms of helping to offset adverse impacts to a number of different ecosystems, ranging from wetlands to forests to native vegetation, etc. I just want to also make a link with regard to the sectors. One of the key themes of the last CBD COP was mainstreaming in 4 sectors, and at the next COP will be a series of other sectors, including energy, infrastructure, etc. And that, in other words, biodiversity offsets are one of the policy instruments that can help you mainstream biodiversity into the other sectors. Again, there are a number of different instruments that can be used, and each different instruments will also require different types of capacity needs from the country that wants to implement those. So here we have the types of examples of capacity needs that need to be in place for offsets, ranging from individual capacity. So you do require expertise to select and apply the correct types of metrics and indicators so that you can compare expected losses versus the gains. Types of organizational capacity that is needed in order to put in place effective biodiversity offsets are things like market support services, so assurance, public registries, brokerage can be helpful as well to lower transaction costs. And finally, enabling conditions, already well presented by my previous excellent speakers, such as laws requiring developers to compensate for their environmental damages. So I don't want to go through these in very much detail. They've been presented in the other presentations, but there are a number of particular design features that come up for biodiversity offsets, equivalence and the offset replacement ratios, the type of offset you want to put in place, whether they're one-off offsets, whether they're payment in lieu or biobanking, and these have different advantages and disadvantages. Additionality and leakage, timing and permanence of the results, and again, monitoring, reporting, and verification, a key issue. This was one of the things when we looked across the different 40 examples of offsets in place. I would say that one of the key weaknesses was insufficient rigor with respect to monitoring, reporting, and verification. And again, without that in place, it becomes extremely difficult to say if you've actually achieved anything at the outset. So really, that is a very, very important factor. Again, I'm just glossing over these because a lot of this has been raised already before. I do want to focus a little bit more on some of the pitfalls to avoid. So it's very important to clearly define the goals and objectives of the offset program. So you need to know what you want to achieve and to also then define indicators and metrics for that, so that eventually at the end, again, you can say, well, have I achieved my objectives? Have I achieved my goals, etc.? You need to clearly define the limits to what can be offset. So in cases where biodiversity or ecosystem services from a particular ecosystem are especially high, if they're likely to be irreplaceable or vulnerable, biodiversity offsets is not the appropriate policy instrument for that. I mean, if they're extremely high, if they're vulnerable, if you don't want them to be destroyed, use another approach. Biodiversity offsets are really to try and help encourage sustainable use of your resources. Again, as before, you need to ensure that there are available offset sites and known conservation approaches to achieve the outcomes that you're really looking for, and monitoring and reporting. This relates also to one of the criticisms against biodiversity offsets, which is the potential for them to be licensed to trash, which can indeed be the case if you haven't designed it in an appropriate manner. So it is important that these are designed appropriately. And in terms of some of examples of good practice insights, it is important to define the threshold. So what can you versus you should not offset. Clear guidance with respect to the mitigation hierarchy, monitoring and reporting. And one example of good practice, for example, is online databases that have been put in place, such as the National Registry in the USA, which is called RIBITS. It's an information tracking system. So you can go to a website and you can see where all the different offsets are. A similar approach has been used by Germany in Hessen and the Naturreg. And finally, also regular program evaluation. So both internal, assessing your own programs and doing adaptive management over time, but it's also very good to have external evaluation, such as was undertaken in the USA, for example, number of years ago, where they realized that things weren't working as well as they had hoped, and so they revised and adapted the program to address those issues. And just to conclude, it is really useful to start small with pilot programs, to test, to review and adapt them, and once you see that you're getting what you want, to then scale up over time. So thanks for that. I do have a couple of publications in the back if interested. But thank you.
Thanks, Katja. I think we should give all 4 speakers a round of applause. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope the intense discussions wasn't too overwhelming. I also hope you have questions, because we're now moving into the second part of the session where you can grill the experts. So our 4 speakers are going to get up, they're going to find a table. I don't know if there are 4 empty tables, so they might kick you off your table. They're going to find a table, and what we would like you to do is get up and join any one of the speakers that you want to chat to or you want to hear more about. You are free to move around. If you've heard what you needed to hear, or if you asked what you need to ask, you can move to another speaker. And I think we have we've got about 15 minutes. So I would encourage swift movement. so that you can maximize your time with our 4 experts.